I die a lot, and so far in the more than 100 hours I've been playing in this world, I have yet to upgrade myself past iron armor, but I do have a good reason for it, and it's not that I don't have enough diamonds. I mean, I've been burning through diamond tools for a couple episodes now, but I'm not really willing to do that with armor. You see, every time I burn through a diamond pickaxe, it's 3 diamonds, but every time I break a chest plate, that would be 8 diamonds per time, and that's a bit much. So before I make diamond armor, I really want to have a fully decked out enchant setup. And that doesn't just mean an enchantment table with a whole lot of bookshelves. I want to do it with villagers because they allow you to customize what enchantments you have on your armor so much more than an enchantment table does. And that is why we're starting today's episode in a village. And the last one, we built this train all the way over to here because my base is filling up and I really want to be able to spread out this villager setup as much as I want. So instead of putting it way over there with the rest of my stuff, I'm going to put it here and put it into all of these little houses and make a perfect villager setup. So let's get started. And the first thing you always have to do for a villager setup is get villagers, which is of course why we are in the village in the first place, but you'll notice that there's not really many villagers around. In fact, if you just go check like every house except for a couple of them, there's no villagers. They're all dead because this thing is close enough to my base that zombies spawn and kill them. I've secured a couple in this building, and I had the forethought to just kind of stick some in a hole. So these two are going to be the ones we are using for our villager breeder. Now, normally I would just make a villager breeder underground somewhere and stick these two in it, you know, feed them bread periodically, and that would be good enough. But since I have so much space in this village to make this whole setup, I think I want to go a little bit fancier than that. And that means kind of putting them in their own building, but there's a little bit of a problem with that. All of these buildings are too small to put a villager breeder in. I mean, technically it would fit in here. The actual, like, mechanics of it is only a 3x3, but I kind of want a little bit more room than that because I was going to make it a fully automatic villager breeder, which means I need a lot of space to do farmland. But luckily the create mod has us covered because normally the way you do an automatic villager breeding setup is you have 2 villagers in the breeder itself and you have a third one tending some crops like carrots or potatoes that it automatically harvests and then throws at these 2 so they can breed with them. But that's actually kind of inefficient and needs a lot of farmland. But with the create mod, we can do it oh so much better. And I've popped over into a creative testing world just to show you how much more efficient this can be. The idea would be that you have a ton of wheat just growing, and then you can automatically harvest those with mechanical harvesters, and that gets you some wheat. If you throw that into a mill, it takes a little bit, and then you get some wheat flour. And wheat flour is really cool because you can wash it, and eventually it will turn into dough. It actually takes a little bit of time, even though it's just one, and that dough can then be smoked either in a smoker or with this little setup, which doesn't require fuel like a smoker would, and that will eventually turn it into bread. And you may have just noticed we just got 1 bread from 1 wheat, which is 3 times more efficient than you can do it in vanilla. But that's not where the efficiency ends. For villagers to breed, they need 1 of 3 different food items, that being potatoes, carrots, or of course, bread. Now, normally in an automatic villager breeder, you use carrots or potatoes because you don't have any way to actually turn the bread into wheat. The other way around. But this system actually fixes that for us. But why bother instead of just using one of the other 2? Well, the thing is, villagers actually breed more efficiently using bread than carrots or potatoes. It only takes 6 bread to breed a villager, whereas it takes 12 carrots or 12 potatoes to achieve the same effect. And with this setup that gets us 1 bread per wheat crop, that means it is twice as efficient as using carrots or potatoes, which means it will save us twice the space on farmland. And because of that 2 times efficiency, we should be able to get away with just 2 of these little crop fields that are already sprinkled around the village, as opposed to the ginormous carrot or potato field that I would otherwise need to make. The only thing is I need to automate these, but with Create's mechanical harvesters, it should be pretty easy, so let's get building. Okay, I made 1 of them, and I think that might actually be all I need because I ended up making it a lot bigger than the naturally generated ones in villages. These ones are like 2x7, whereas this is 3x8, so it's, you know, a little bit bigger, not a ton, but I think it's bigger enough that we actually should only need 1 of them. Plus, I guess I don't actually need bread all that often, and This thing is fully automatic, and the best thing is it really doesn't look like it is, which I really like. So every 5 minutes, this thing is going to try and harvest the wheat, and that's probably a little bit too often, but the way it does that is if we head down here, there's a little timer, and every time that activates, it's going to activate 2 mechanical bearings here and there, and those mechanical bearings will spin all of these harvesters up above the surface to collect all the wheat, which I think is a really cool way for it to harvest them. They just like kind of come out of the water and then disappear over on this side. And sadly, 5 minutes is actually a while, so we're definitely not going to get to see it go. But something I can do is I can kind of just decrease the timer, say to every 20 seconds. Why not? And now we should get it actually going, maybe? Yeah, there we go. Okay, so every time the timer goes off, it does that, and that'll harvest any wheat that is fully grown currently. None of it is, but, you know, it's fine. It'll also replant it automatically because that's just how mechanical harvesters work. So this should work absolutely amazing, although I'm not really sure what to put the timer on yet because, honestly, 5 minutes is probably a bit too short. But I do kind of want to just occasionally see it go, so I think I'm going to leave it at 5 minutes. And now we have a source of wheat, and I'm not going to build another one because I don't think I need it. So the next step is we need to grind this stuff up into flour, which is something I could do very simply. I could just stick a tiny little grindstone underground somewhere in here that all the wheat gets funneled into, and then output the flour of that to somewhere else. But honestly, like I said earlier, I have a lot of space to play around with here, so I'm not going to do that. I want to make a full windmill to grind up the wheat into flour, which of course means I have to actually like design and build a windmill, which apparently I'm really bad at because I've tried to build windmills before and boy, did they turn out bad. But I think I can definitely do a little bit better than ones I've done in the past. Not that I've ever shown any of them on YouTube, but, you know, I've made them in single player and they were not good. But I'm going to try and make an actually good windmill design. Just go mess around, see what works, see what doesn't, and I'll be back in a second. Got the schematic for the design all ready, so without further ado, let's jump into a time lapse and build ourselves a little windmill. I absolutely love how this thing turned out. I think this is the best windmill I've ever made, and it just looks so good. I mean, to be fair, I haven't built a whole lot of windmills. There's the one over at my base and this one, and that is actually it. That's all of them. But this, it just looks so nice, and I kind of put a lot more effort into the windmill blade design, I guess, than I did in my other one. Instead of it just being like swoopy and stuff, I actually modeled it after a Dutch windmill, and I think it looked really good with the kind of more like squared off windmill fans. It looks so great, and I kind of just, you know, stole the style from the village because that's kind of what I'm going with. I'm going to build probably quite a few more buildings by the time I finish this villager setup. They're all going to be in this style because it's very easy to do, and I like that. But this windmill currently isn't actually functional because it has a nice spinning windmill thing on the top, but if we head inside, there's not much of anything in here. And in the spirit of not hiding stuff away and just putting like a pair of crushing wheels in here that wheat gets put into, I want to actually make a proper interior, makes this thing look good. Something like this, I'm thinking, I kind of already built it, but I think it looks really good, and it's also completely functional. You can see wheat dropping in occasionally because that is automatically hooked up to the wheat farm, and it goes in between the crushing wheels, and in these crushing wheels that are fake, there are real crushing wheels, so the wheat is getting crushed up by the actual functional ones, and it goes down this chute that you can just barely see and ends up in this chest. And honestly, this thing has already produced like a ton of wheat flour. We're almost up to a stack just since I like built it and I've been like bug fixing and stuff, because boy did this thing take a lot of bug fixing. Can I tell you, this, like, these two wheels are so janky because you can place blocks inside of spinning things like this, which allows for a lot of the like mechanics of this to actually work. So a lot of it's hidden in the wheels itself, but items still interact with them. Like I can throw an item against here and it just, well, actually that time it worked, but you can do something like that and the item just gets stuck. if it gets stuck there, it never gets crushed. So it was a big headache to try and get the items to always actually end up in the crushing wheels, and that's why this middle piece looks so bad, honestly, because originally it looked like this with like a trap door under there or a stair, but anything less than a full block and the items occasionally get stuck in that little nook, which is kind of an issue. So we should be good to just kind of let this thing run, and it will continue to produce wheat flour straight from the wheat farm. It should be great, but there is, of course, still kind of one step left because wheat flour is not something that I can feed to villagers. So got to make a bakery, and keeping in tune with the theme of actually making nice-looking buildings like this one that I spent far too much time on and then didn't even use like any of the upper floors, I'm going to make a bakery and not just, you know, shove the cooking system underground somewhere. So I got to find a place to build that actually makes any sense, because I'm trying to make this village town layout like actually make sense, because currently we have like a wheat farm and the windmill is like right next to the wheat farm. That checks out. But a bakery is something you'd probably want to put more in central town. I think I'm going to keep this little town square, so it's going to go somewhere near here because, you know, you'd be going to the market and like buy some bread from the bakery, for instance. So thinking somewhere around here, but I need to come up with a design and stuff, and then we can go ahead and build it. Okay, just like the windmill, I have made up a design. It's just a nice little villager style hut that's going to go right here. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into a time lapse. And there we go, we got a beautiful little baker's hut, and even the interior is all completed. But I think this one looks really good. It's also quite basic, but also has a little bit of extra like detailing, like this roof style never exists in a village. But I think it looks pretty great. And I didn't actually make like a market stall or anything out here, which I was originally kind of planning to do, but I might do that later if I decide to actually make a market here. But for now, it's just going to be this. And this thing should work flawlessly. You can just see a little bit of the mechanics in there. And I've taken all the flour that the windmill has produced out of the windmill because I want to actually do it on camera. So if we go over here and we give this windmill a little bit of flour, or more accurately, that spot, this is going to be so hard to do. I need to get it in there. No, okay, 1 minute. You just have to pretend that it was actually processed. We put it in there and it is going, and I don't want to actually miss it getting processed. There's a conveyor belt that is a lot faster than the last one I made that goes all the way over to the baker's hut. I just made it fast because it's quite long too. And if we go in here, you can see the flour has ended up in the oven. And currently it is using a fan to wash it with this water. You'll notice there's also a campfire there, but because the water is above the campfire, it only does water and doesn't just like put fire on it. And once it gets turned into dough, which is actually going to take a little bit because that's, I think, a stack of wheat flour, then it will automatically turn off the water with this dispenser, and then the smoke will actually go through. It looks like it changed, and now it's dough, and the smoke will smoke it until it is turned into bread. And that bread, of course, gets automatically collected and put in this chest. And the entire process is actually like really fast. Like we've almost done a full stack of bread already, which is kind of insane. I mean, granted, it doesn't need to be this fast because, well, you know, the actual windmill is really slow, and so is the farm. And it looks like that just finished because we got some new wheat flour in there. If we pop down here, I think, yeah, I got this chest. We got some bread. Perfect. And all that bread can go ahead and get put into a villager breeder, which of course we haven't actually built yet. But I don't actually want to build it for a second because I want to make sure that this supply of bread is actually good enough. Because like I mentioned earlier, it's real slow. Like this thing harvests every 5 minutes, and every time it does that, it gets like just a couple, like it just went pretty much, and there's just a couple grown. It only gets like 10 at most, I'd say, per 5 minutes. And of course that does get turned into slightly more than 10 bread, but it's still pretty slow. So I want to make sure that that's actually enough to breed villagers. And while there isn't some like minimum threshold, I just need a certain amount of villagers to do stuff with. So to test this thing out, I'm going to go ahead and let the entire system run for a full hour. And I'm going to see how much bread it produces, because it takes 6 bread, I believe, per villager. So I think 12 in total to breed a villager and get a new baby. So I want to make sure that it really, at least produces 12 an hour. I'm assuming it'll be more than that. But if it doesn't meet that threshold, I definitely need to build more farms, and probably not another windmill, but definitely more farms. So I'm going to go ahead and AFK for an hour, see how much bread this thing produces, and we can go from there. You want to know how far I got into that hour before I realized that this farm wasn't harvesting? 45 minutes. Literally 3/4 of the time I was going to AFK is how long it took me to realize this thing wasn't going. I haven't checked why it's not going yet, but it has clearly stopped, which means something is, I assume, wrong, because, you know, it's not working. My main guess is when I built that, this section was all included in the schematic as well, so maybe it changed something here. That would really suck if it did, but that's my best guess at this point. So I think, yeah, this is what's wrong. That right there. What are you doing there, Mr. Observer? Will that fix it? No, I have to break the observer itself. Okay, turns out the timer was off. There we go. Now that should actually be harvesting every 10 minutes. So let's go ahead and try again. I'm suffocating. What the? Okay. Well, that's one way to get out of it. Let's go ahead and try again and do an hour of AFKing and see how much this thing produces. It worked this time. In fact, the system is actually making some bread as we speak, but since it's already been an hour, that one shouldn't be included realistically. But if we mine down here, we have about a stack and 45 bread, which is pretty good for 1 hour of AFKing. That I don't want to do the math, but that's more than a bread a minute, essentially, which should be more than enough for villager breeder, because that will mean we get roughly about, like, the math, it's hard, enough villagers per hour. We'll get more than 1 villager per hour, which is plenty for the amount of time they'll be spending here. I do not need more than that. So next step is build the villager breeder. But that has one big issue, which is that I want the villager breeder to be very central and also very visible, which sounds like a very big problem because I've kind of run out of space to put in new buildings in this area. So I probably have to actually tear down some buildings, which probably means I have to like rework the road network a little bit to make everything fit nicely together. And honestly, I don't have time for that in this episode, so we're going to go ahead and push off the villager breeder until the next one and end this one here. So for now, I really hope you liked it, and I will see you then.